cannot believe how 5 older teenagers, so-called water boys, climb onto the side of her vehicle, apparently to get money or who knows.
It's terribly upsetting every time I read about it.
What does she do?
There's nothing that she can do. She's stuck. You know, it looked like she handled it as safely as she could by trying to get out.
Terrifying.
Critics have a lot to say.
Part of what is so heart-wrenching about this documentary short for me is that so much of it is spent trying to humanize and prove that the water boys are humans and people who matter. And I think for me this was really emotional because it seems like such a basic fact and it shouldn't be something that we're disputing or arguing, but as we progress through the short, that's what happens. And I think it was really tough to watch the reception from people with prejudice, especially in the news reports that were shown pretty early in the short. And I think the folks featured in the doc as talking heads were really perfect, and I think their points were so strong and true. And I think that is something that's really strong about this piece, is you can really see how much everybody does care for the water boys. And I think this film also, to me, illuminated a lot of statistics about Atlanta that I wasn't aware of. And for me, I think also the ending of this short was really moving and was really perfect, especially as we got to hear from a water boy who is an entrepreneur and is trying to find his way and do well for himself and his family.
I think when it comes to people who are selling things on the side of the street, just different vendors, you know, across the country, I think it's such a commonplace practice that a lot of people dehumanize these people and what they're going through and why they are becoming street vendors, essentially. And especially in something as mundane as water, I think there's a big disconnect from the seller and the person who's buying it, and the importance of this way of commerce for street vendors, and in this case specifically, to where it is, you know, a lot of boys just, you know, trying to help make ends meet, and who have fallen on hard times and who have dropped out of school, and all the different circumstances that lead to them becoming water boys. I think it's incredibly informational. I think it adds so much. I think there's a big source of empathy after watching this for these water boys and what they're going through. And also it takes a very good look at the systematic failures that have caused them to have to do this.
This is about systemic poverty in Black Mecca, which is Atlanta. And within this documentary, it showcases a lot of problems of how they are honestly just trying to make an honest living and survive, despite the challenges that they are kind of served to on a platter. You know, they already have to fight, you know, the lack of space within their homes and living with 13 people under one person's check, to not having access to grocery stores in their neighborhood, to already be given a system to where you're not given a chance to succeed, essentially, you know, following this pattern of being in juvenile detention, kind of setting them up to essentially go down the road of being in the prison system, you know, fighting gangs, things of that nature. We see this journey of these boys essentially, you know, getting taken through this act of violence on the streets when they're simply trying to sell water bottles. And it's kind of wild to see that this is what we have succumbed to. So to be able to see this through this specific lens, this eye, I think is very important as we continue to grow and have these conversations that definitely need to be had, because, you know, they do prove a valid point of how the dialect would change had this be a story of a group of white boys selling water.
I thought that the short does an amazing job of presenting the topic and the background and also the issues related to it. I think in a really short amount of time, it manages to not only give background information and catch the audience up to speed with the topic, but it also presents the issues with how the news and politicians are responding to the negative issues that have arisen from the water boys. And it also talks about what this means in terms of a hopeful future, supporting the youth with entrepreneurship programs and what the impacts of systemic racism are having on youth being resourceful in the face of poverty within the United States. I think it's a really interesting and informative short documentary, and I think it has a lot of potential to inspire some of those programs that might help future generations.
I've seen people selling drinks off the street. I didn't know there was a territorial war about it. I just figured there are people, hard circumstances. This actually makes me want to carry cash around a little bit until they start talking about guns and fighting over who gets to sell the water. The fact that this was very educational and explaining why these boys are doing it, where they've dropped out of school. They're trying to do something to support their families because they're struggling and they got a city against them. It's really, really sad because that's what they are at the end of the day. They're children. And they're having a system that's making them struggle and fight against each other. I saw children who are struggling and fighting just to survive. And they really need that help to go forward and live another day without the struggle. They should be able to do it and just let their parents worry about providing the living without them also involved in it.